The fine rain streamed down the dark city streets, forming uneven rivulets running through clogged gutters. 10-year-old Sophia huddled beneath a worn-out, tattered blanket, her only shield against the relentless cold. The damp concrete offered no comfort, but she was used to it. There, in an almost invisible corner of the central square, the girl found some semblance of shelter among the shadows. Her watchful eyes followed the constant flow of hurried people, tired, indifferent faces crossing the square without noticing her presence. To the world, Sophia was just part of the scenery, an insignificant detail in the urban landscape. But to her, every face told a story, every gesture hid a secret. That night, while clutching her small bundle of belongings, Sophia spotted a couple arguing near one of the square's picnic tables. The tall man, with a harsh expression, gestured aggressively, while the woman held a defiant stance despite the evident fear in her eyes. It wasn't the first time Sophia had seen scenes like that. Conflicts played out daily around her. But something about this moment made her pay closer attention. Her gaze locked onto the man's hands. He held a small, translucent vial. With a swift, almost imperceptible motion, he poured its contents into the plastic container the woman had placed on the table. A chill ran down Sophia's spine. Something was wrong. The woman, exhausted, collapsed onto one of the square's benches after the man stormed off in apparent anger. She looked at the food container with resignation and began opening the lid. Sophia jumped to her feet, forgetting for a moment her usual invisibility. Her heart pounded wildly. What if she was wrong? What if no one believed her? She'd just be a dirty, ragged street child babbling nonsense. But what if she was right? Cautiously, she approached the woman, still uncertain. Her mouth felt dry, and a knot tightened in her throat. She had to do something. But how could she warn someone who would likely dismiss her without hearing a single word? The woman held the fork when Sophia, driven by desperation, shouted, "Don't eat that!" Her voice came out louder and firmer than she'd expected, echoing across the nearly deserted square. The woman stared at her, surprised and confused, while a few passers-by also turned, intrigued. "Who are you?" the woman demanded, frowning suspiciously. "There's poison in your food. I saw that man put something in your container," Sophia insisted, pointing toward where the man had disappeared. The woman's gaze shifted between the distressed girl and the container in her hands. People nearby began murmuring among themselves. An elderly woman muttered something about street kids, making up stories for attention. "Go away," the woman ordered, her voice harsh but trembling. Before Sophia could say anything else, heavy footsteps echoed across the square. It was the man, returning in a hurry. His eyes widened when he saw Sophia, and for a brief moment, the threat in his gaze was unmistakable. "What's going on here?" he asked, trying to sound confused and innocent. "This girl, she said you," the woman began, but her voice faded as she noticed the cold, menacing expression on the man's face. Sophia instinctively took a step back, but didn't run. He knew she had seen everything. "I'm not lying. I saw it," she shouted again, fear and anger mixing in her voice. The man took a step forward, but stopped when a municipal guard patrolling the square approached. Forcing a smile, the man changed his tone. "This little girl is trying to extort my wife, making up absurd stories," he said with false indignation. The woman, still confused and vulnerable, hesitated. The guard looked at Sophia with suspicion, used to dealing with street kids trying to get attention or money. "I don't want any trouble here. Go back to where you came from," the guard said impatiently. The world seemed to collapse around Sophia. Words failed her. No one would listen. But then, an almost invisible detail caught her eye. A faint chemical sheen at the bottom of the container, barely visible under the dim streetlight. Without thinking, Sophia rushed forward and knocked the food from the woman's hands. "It's poisoned," she shouted as the contents scattered across the pavement. For a moment, silence gripped the place. The woman, still in disbelief, stared at the overturned container, then at Sophia, and finally at the man, whose face was now pale and twisted with suppressed fury. Something had changed. Sophia's silent cry had finally been heard, even if just for a moment. And at that instant, she knew there was no turning back. The fight for truth had only just begun. The night advanced slowly and relentlessly over the city. The dim streetlights cast distorted shadows on the weathered walls of the buildings around the square. Sophia could still feel her heart racing, as though danger was still lurking nearby. The man's pale, enraged face remained etched in her memory. The woman, now in shock and clutching the empty food container, mumbled incoherent words. Those who had previously judged her with disdain now watched with uneasy curiosity. Yet, no hand reached out to help her. The municipal guard, confused and uninterested in complications, simply warned, "I don't want more trouble here. Go home or wherever you stay." Sophia knew she couldn't remain there. The man was still somewhere in the shadows, watching, planning his next move. He knew she knew. Without waiting, Sophia tugged at the woman's sleeve. "We need to get out of here," she whispered urgently. I don't understand," the woman stammered, dazed. "He'll come back. You have to trust me," Sophia insisted, her small, trembling fingers tightening around the woman's wrist. Finally, as if awakening from a nightmare, the woman nodded. Together, they began hurrying through the deserted streets, guided by the determination of a girl who, despite her fear, couldn't let injustice win. Sophia knew every alley, every backstreet of that forgotten part of the city. With quick steps, she led the woman to an old abandoned factory, a place she often used as a refuge when the square became too dangerous. "We'll be safe here for a while," she said, guiding the woman inside. The interior was cold and damp, its walls marked by time and its windows shattered. Yet for Sophia, it was a sanctuary. She lit a small candle she kept in her bundle of belongings, casting a flickering light over the dark space. "Why did you do that?" the woman asked, still incredulous. "You could have been hurt, or worse." Sophia looked away, shrugging. "I couldn't let you die," she murmured. "I've lost too many people already." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken pain and distant memories. After a moment, the woman took a deep breath and introduced herself. "My name is Clara. I don't know how to thank you." "No need to thank me," Sophia replied firmly. "But he'll come after us. We need to think of something." Clara nodded, still processing the gravity of the situation. As she tried to steady her breathing, she observed the thin, dirty girl who had risked everything to save her. That frail-looking child was stronger than any adult she had ever met. Suddenly, a distant noise echoed through the walls of the old factory, slow, deliberate footsteps. Sophia blew out the candle with a quick breath and motioned for Clara to stay silent. Her eyes adjusted swiftly to the darkness. "Who's there?" A familiar voice called out from the shadows. It was him. Sophia's body stiffened. The man hadn't given up. He was determined to erase any trace of his failed murder attempt. Moving silently, she crept toward a stack of old crates and pulled Clara with her. "Don't make a sound," she whispered. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the metallic scraping of something being dragged along the floor. A tool? A weapon? Sophia didn't want to find out. The fear was real, but it also fueled her. She hadn't survived the streets this long, by sheer luck. She was smart, agile, and above all, determined. Suddenly, Clara's foot hit a loose piece of metal. The sound echoed through the cold air like a death sentence. "I know you're here," the man's voice taunted, dripping with malice. "There's no use hiding." Sophia squeezed Clara's hand tightly. "Trust me. Run when I tell you," she whispered. Before Clara could respond, Sophia stepped out of the shadows, holding a rusty metal pipe in her hands. "Here I am," she shouted with all the strength in her lungs, drawing the man's attention. Surprised by her audacity, he took a step toward her, forgetting about Clara for a moment. It was the opportunity they needed. "Run!" Sophia screamed. Clara didn't hesitate any longer. While Sophia faced a man with a courage that defied her age, Clara sprinted toward the factory's exit. For one eternal moment, Sophia stood her ground, facing the danger head-on. Her body trembled, but her eyes burned with determination. And then she ran too. The chase was only just beginning. The sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the damp alleys of the city. Sophia ran with all the strength her small legs could muster, feeling the icy air cutting her skin and her heart pounding like a frantic drum. Every breath was a painful effort, but she couldn't stop. Behind her, the man who represented a deadly threat advanced with heavy, determined steps. Clara ran just ahead, still shaken by shock and fear, but driven by the courage Sophia displayed. Despite her apparent fragility, the girl was an unstoppable force. Her determination to protect them seemed unbreakable. The city at night was a labyrinth of narrow streets, forgotten alleys, and dangerous passageways. Sophia knew the area like the back of her hand. Having lived on the streets, she'd learned that knowing the terrain was her greatest advantage. There was always a hidden escape route, a secret passage only she knew. "This way," she whispered to Clara, pulling her into a narrow corridor between two decaying buildings. The strong smell of garbage and dampness filled their lungs, but it didn't matter. What mattered was creating distance and evading their pursuer. The chase felt endless. Every noise in the darkness made Sophia's heart race. Her senses were sharpened by adrenaline. On impulse, she stopped abruptly and pulled Clara behind a pile of boxes and trash bags stacked in a dark corner. They remained perfectly still, barely breathing, as the man's footsteps echoed through the nearby street. The faint glow of a distant streetlight partially illuminated the alley, but their shadows stayed hidden. "I know you're here," the man's cold, sharp voice rang out, cutting through the air like a blade. Sophia squeezed Clara's hand, silently conveying calm. It wasn't the first time she'd hidden from threats in the dark streets of the city. The man paused for a moment, as if sniffing out their fear. Then, after a few oppressive seconds of silence, his footsteps slowly retreated. Sophia waited several minutes before moving. "I think we lost him," Clara whispered, her voice filled with uncertainty. "He won't give up that easily," Sophia replied with a maturity far beyond her age. "We have to keep moving." With quick, silent steps, they navigated the alleys until they reached an old abandoned building Sophia knew well. It was a forgotten structure, used by the homeless and others with nowhere else to go. They slipped through a broken window into a dark, empty space where only the distant sounds of the city could be heard. Sophia helped Clara sit in a corner while she rummaged through her makeshift backpack. "Here," she said, handing over a piece of stale bread and a half-full water bottle. Clara took the items with trembling hands, tears welling up in her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" she asked emotionally. Sophia averted her gaze. "No one ever helped me. I don't want that to happen to you too." Before Clara could respond, a sudden noise came from downstairs, the unmistakable sound of a door being forced open. Sophia immediately extinguished the small candle she had lit and motioned for Clara to stay still. Terror was etched in both their eyes. Heavy footsteps echoed on the worn wooden stairs. The old wood creaked under the weight of someone slowly ascending. "They have to be here somewhere," the man's cold voice murmured to himself. Sophia, her heart pounding, pulled Clara into a darker corner. Her mind worked quickly, searching for an escape. There was no more time to run. The man moved closer, each step marking the passage of time like a relentless clock. He was too close. Sophia grabbed a rusty metal bar she found near a pile of debris. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. Clara clutched her hand tightly. "You don't have to do this," she whispered in despair. "Yes, I do," Sophia answered coldly, with steely determination. "I won't let him hurt us." The sound of a door being violently pushed open echoed down the nearby hallway. The man was only a few meters away. Suddenly, Something shifted in Sophia's eyes. She wasn't just a defenseless street girl. She was a survivor. And at that moment, she decided the chase would end here, one way or another. The faint lights flickered as tension hung thick in the air like an ominous warning. The battle was about to begin. Sophia's breathing was slow and controlled, despite her heart pounding furiously in her chest. The darkness of the old abandoned factory seemed to close in around her like a suffocating web. Clara stood motionless beside her, petrified with fear. They could hear the man's firm, calculated footsteps approaching, echoing against the cold, faded walls. Sophia knew there was no way left to run. He was determined to find them and ensure his attempted murder would never be discovered. Time seemed frozen, but her mind raced at a frantic pace, calculating every possibility. Suddenly, the sharp silence was shattered by a deafening creak. A heavy door opened somewhere on the lower floor. Sophia instinctively tightened her grip on the rusty metal bar she held with her small, calloused hands. "They're here. I know they are," the man murmured in a cold, methodical tone, savoring the sense of control. Sophia turned to Clara, whispering almost without moving her lips. "When I shout, run to the emergency exit. Follow the wall to your right until you find a metal staircase. Don't stop. Don't look back. And you," Clara whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "I'll hold him back," Sophia replied firmly. "Trust me." Clara hesitated, but Sophia's determined gaze convinced her. It wasn't an empty promise. It was their only chance. Sophia rose slowly, moving like a shadow through the scattered debris on the floor. She spotted a pile of old wooden planks and metal crates near one of the central columns. With extreme care, she stacked the crates precariously, creating an improvised trap. A small push would bring everything down. She barely had time to position herself before hearing steady footsteps climbing the metal staircase. He was getting closer. "Let's finish this once and for all," the threatening voice murmured. Sophia took a deep breath, adjusting the metal bar in her trembling but steady hands. Fear burned in her veins, but so did her fierce will to survive. Suddenly, a tall figure emerged from the darkness, illuminated only by the faint light of a broken window. His cold eyes found her instantly. "Think you can hide from me?" he growled, advancing like a beast ready to strike. Sophia took a step back, drawing closer to the pile of crates. "Come and get me," she challenged, her voice filled with courage. He lunged at her, his hand outstretched to grab her, but Sophia acted first. With a swift movement, she kicked the pile of crates, sending them crashing down with a deafening noise. One of the metal bars fell, hitting the man's shoulder and causing him to stagger. "Clara, run!" Sophia shouted as chaos filled the room. From somewhere behind her, she heard Clara's hurried footsteps running toward the exit, just as they had planned. Furious and wounded, the man regained his balance and charged toward Sophia. The fight was brutal. He tried to grab her, but she was quick and agile, dodging with precise movements. She used the metal bar to keep him at bay, delivering blows whenever possible. With each strike, she felt her strength waning but refused to give up. Finally, in a moment of distraction, he shoved her against a wall, knocking the metal bar from her hands. Sophia collapsed with a groan of pain, tasting blood in her mouth. "It's over," he hissed, advancing slowly. But before he could reach her, an unexpected sound echoed through the factory. Police sirens. The victorious expression on the man's face twisted into pure hatred. "No!" he growled, turning to flee. But it was too late. After escaping through the emergency exit, Clara had found a nearby public phone and called the police. The sound of sirens was like music to Sophia's ears. Before disappearing into the shadows, the man cast one final dark, threatening look at Sophia, silently promising that this wasn't over. Sophia collapsed to the ground, exhausted and injured, but alive. Shortly after, Clara returned with 2 police officers who immediately rushed to help Sophia. The girl's weary eyes met Clara's, who was now safe. "I knew you'd make it," Clara murmured, kneeling beside her. Sophia managed a faint smile, despite the pain. For the first time, she felt she wasn't completely alone. She had fought, survived, and saved a life. Even in the darkness, her silent cry had finally been heard. The battle might have ended, but her story was only just beginning. The sound of the police siren faded into the distance, blending with the city's constant hum. Sophia sat in the back of the ambulance, a thin blanket draped over her shoulders. Her bruised face and trembling hands were the aftermath of an intense battle, but her eyes still burned with unwavering determination. Clara sat beside her, still in shock but grateful to be alive. Paramedics checked her vital signs as a stern-faced police officer approached. "You were very brave," the officer said, crouching to meet Sophia's gaze. "But I need to understand exactly what happened." Sophia nodded, taking a deep breath. She began recounting the story from the very beginning, describing every detail, from the moment she saw the man poisoning the food container to the final confrontation in the abandoned factory. As she spoke, her mind was flooded with memories from her past, moments she tried to bury surface like shadows that never truly disappeared. Sophia remembered a very similar night years before. She was only 6 when her mother, a strong and loving woman, vanished without a trace. She could still recall being alone in a cold, dark room, screaming for help, but no one came. Since then, living on the streets had been her only reality. She had learned to survive with intelligence and courage, but the pain of that loss never left her. Her gaze drifted momentarily as memories blurred into the present. "Sophia," the officer's voice called gently, pulling her back. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she murmured, pushing the memories aside. "I was just remembering something." After finishing her account, the officer exchanged a meaningful glance with another officer watching from a distance. "We'll do our best to find that man," she promised. "You're safe for now, but we need to take you both to a temporary protection facility." Clara held Sophia's hand tightly. "We won't be separated, right?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "No, we'll stay together," Sophia assured her without hesitation. Despite her confidence, something inside her remained uneasy. The man's cold, piercing gaze was still etched in her mind, a silent promise that it wasn't over. Hours later, they were taken to an emergency shelter run by a humanitarian organization. It was a modest building, but clean and welcoming. A social worker named Helena greeted them with a kind smile. "You're safe now," Helena said, guiding them into a small room with 2 simple beds. "Try to get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." Clara collapsed onto the bed, exhausted, and fell asleep almost immediately. But Sophia stayed awake, watching the window with its partially open curtains. The night felt too quiet, as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting to stir again. Hours later, Sophia was startled by a low metallic sound outside. She rose carefully, making sure not to wake Clara, and walked over to the window. In a deserted street below, a black car was parked under the dim glow of a streetlight. Inside, a still figure appeared to be watching her. Her entire body tensed. She knew it wasn't a coincidence. Before she could back away, the car's headlights flicked on, briefly illuminating her face. Then the car sped off, vanishing into the dark streets. Sophia quickly shut the curtain, her heart pounding like a drum. That same night, without waking Clara, Sophia grabbed her small backpack with its few belongings and silently slipped out of the room. She knew she couldn't stay there. The shelter was safe, but not for them. With quiet steps, she exited through the building's back doors and disappeared into the city's dark embrace. As she walked through the cold streets, her gaze burned with fierce determination. There was something she needed to uncover, something the man knew about her. And Sophia was willing to face any danger to uncover the truth behind her own story. The hunt had just begun again, The biting cold of the early morning seemed to wrap around Sophia like a chilling veil as she walked through the dark, deserted streets. Every step was a calculated decision. Every corner turned a gamble. Her senses were on high alert, but something deep inside pulsed with determination. Running was no longer an option. It was time to uncover the truth. Behind her, the city continued its relentless rhythm, indifferent to the hidden stories unfolding in its shadows. But for Sophia, that night was different. There was something profoundly personal about it, something pulling her toward a fate she didn't yet fully understand. Sophia crossed a narrow alley, guided by instinct and a hazy memory from her childhood. Disconnected fragments of faces, voices, and forgotten places surfaced insistently, like pieces of an incomplete puzzle. Her thoughts were interrupted by the distant sound of footsteps. She stopped abruptly, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness. She could feel it. She was being followed. With a swift motion, she hid behind a stack of piled crates. Holding her breath, she listened carefully. The footsteps drew closer, stopping just a few meters away. A tall, broad-shouldered man emerged from the shadows, wearing a heavy coat and standing tensely, as if he knew exactly what he was looking for. Sophia clenched her fists. It was him. Before she could think about escaping, a soft yet firm voice whispered behind her, "Don't move. He can't see us." Sophia spun around, ready to fight, but was met with an intense-eyed woman whose face was partially hidden under a dark hood. Her eyes were fixed on the man in the distance. "Who are you?" Sophia whispered, struggling to stay calm. "Someone who wants the same thing you do, to survive," the woman replied. "Come, we need to leave before he notices." With no time for questions, Sophia followed the stranger through a labyrinth of narrow alleyways until they reached a rusted door concealed behind a worn brick wall. The woman unlocked it swiftly and pushed Sophia inside. The interior was a small, cluttered space, lit only by a single hanging lamp. Old maps and scattered documents covered a worn wooden table. Primitive electronic equipment buzzed faintly in the background. "Where are we?" Sophia asked, still breathless. "A safe place, for now," the woman replied, removing her hood to reveal dark hair tied in a braid. "My name is Elena." Sophia kept her distance, still wary. "Why did you help me?" Elena sighed, crossing her arms. "Because I know who you are, and I know what he wants from you." Sophia took a step forward, her piercing gaze demanding answers. "What do you know about me? Tell me now." Elena walked over to the table and grabbed an old, worn-out file, tossing it in front of Sophia. "Your mother. She was investigating something very dangerous before she disappeared. Something involving powerful people, including the man chasing you." The words hit Sophia like an icy wind. With trembling hands, she opened the file, revealing photos, reports, and old newspaper clippings about mysterious disappearances and abruptly closed investigations. "You knew my mother?" Sophia murmured, struggling to process what she was seeing. Elena nodded slowly. "We worked together for a while. When she disappeared, I continued what she started, until I realized I was alone in this fight." Sophia closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of a long-buried truth. It explained so much, yet raised even more questions. "Why is he still after me?" she asked, now with restrained anger. "Because you're the key to something your mother discovered, something he needs to keep buried at all costs." Before she could ask more, a quiet alarm started beeping. Elena rushed to a makeshift monitor, showing security camera footage from the surrounding area. "He found us," Elena said tensely. "We need to leave now." Sophia grabbed a small survival knife she spotted on a nearby shelf, her gaze colder and more determined than ever. "This time, I'm not running," she declared. Elena paused for a moment and saw something in the girl she hadn't noticed before, an unyielding strength forged by pain and loss. "Then we fight," Elena said, pulling a gun from under the table. The battle was about to begin again, but this time, Sophia wasn't alone. The shadows could hide many secrets, but this time, the truth was about to be revealed, no matter the cost. The night was thick with an almost palpable tension. The silence was broken only by the quick footsteps of Sophia and Elena as they ran through the dark alleys, driven by the urgency to escape. Their former hideout was now just a distant memory, burned into their minds by a desperate flight. The man hunting them was closer than ever. Elena quickly checked her weapon as they moved. It wasn't much, but it would be enough to buy some time if they were cornered. "We need to get out of the perimeter before dawn," Elena whispered, scanning their surroundings carefully. "He found us so fast." "How did he know where we were?" Sophia asked, still breathless. Elena hesitated before answering. "I think we have a traitor." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sophia felt a pang of fear but also anger. They needed to escape, but more importantly, they needed to find out who was working against them. A few minutes later, they reached an old, abandoned train station on the outskirts of the city. It was a desolate, grim place, perfect for disappearing for a while. Elena guided Sophia to a hidden room at the back, secured by rusty bars and a heavy steel door. "No one will find us here," she assured. Before they could settle in, a faint metallic scraping echoed through the dark corridor. They both froze. "Did you hear that?" Sophia murmured. Elena nodded, raising her weapon with calculated precision. Suddenly, the station's dim lights flickered and went out completely, plunging them into absolute darkness. "It's a trap," Elena whispered. Without warning, a loud crack sounded, followed by hurried footsteps. Before Elena could react, the steel door was breached, sending sparks flying across the floor. Two masked men stormed in, armed and ready. Sophia reacted instinctively. In a split second, she pulled Elena behind a stack of crates as gunfire echoed through the empty space. "This way," Sophia shouted, pointing toward a dimly lit side exit. They ran, their steps muffled by dust and debris. Each breath was a struggle against the growing fear. When they reached an old machine room, Elena secured the door with an improvised metal bar. "This won't hold them for long," she muttered. Sophia was already scanning the environment. Her sharp eyes spotted an old control panel with exposed wires. "If I can reactivate the electrical system, we can overload the lights and blind them temporarily," Sophia suggested. Elena looked at her, impressed by the girl's quick thinking. "Do it. I'll cover you." While Sophia worked quickly on the frayed wires, Elena kept her weapon aimed at the door, listening for every sound outside. Her instincts screamed that they were running out of time. With one final adjustment, Sophia connected two exposed wires, sending a shower of sparks flying. The electrical system groaned, and after a tense moment, the emergency lights came on, casting an intermittent red glow across the building. "That's going to draw attention," Elena warned. "Exactly." Sophia smirked faintly. At that moment, the door was breached again, but this time they were prepared. The intense lights flashed erratically, temporarily blinding the attackers. Elena opened fire, forcing them to retreat. "This way," Sophia shouted, already sprinting toward another side exit. They descended a rusty staircase into an old maintenance tunnel where the darkness was nearly impenetrable. Moisture dripped from the walls, and the smell of rust and dust was suffocating. "We can't keep running forever," Sophia murmured, stopping to catch her breath. "I know," Elena replied, breathing heavily. "But now we have an advantage. We know they're not invincible." Sophia nodded, though she knew this was far from over. The man chasing them was still out there, and more determined than ever. As they advanced deeper into the dark tunnel, only one certainty guided Sophia. There was no room left for fear or hesitation. The fight for the truth was just beginning, and this time she wouldn't be the prey. The cold darkness of the tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly. Moisture clung to the walls, thickening the air, while the echo of hurried footsteps resonated like a constant warning of imminent danger. Sophia and Elena walked in silence, each lost in her own thoughts but ever alert to what might be lurking nearby. Sophia adjusted the small backpack she carried, holding a few improvised supplies and the old survival knife that had become her trusted ally. Since escaping the abandoned train station, her mind had been in constant motion, tracing escape routes and planning their next move. "How long until we find a way out?" Sophia asked, breaking the oppressive silence. "Not long," Elena replied, studying the faded markings on the tunnel walls. "If my memory serves, these tunnels were used for cargo transport years ago. They should lead to the outskirts of the city." Sophia nodded but couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that they were being watched. Ever since they'd entered the tunnels, her instincts had been screaming that something was wrong. As they moved forward, memories began to invade Sophia's mind. Disconnected fragments from her childhood surfaced like distant shadows. Images of her mother, with a gentle smile and tired but loving eyes, flashed through her mind like a painful echo. She remembered one specific night, when she hid in a small closet while her mother argued with someone on the phone. The words were tense and filled with fear. "They know we're running out of time. She's the key." The sound of her mother's muffled scream still echoed in her nightmares. Sophia shook her head, forcing the painful memories away. The present demanded her full attention. Suddenly, a distant metallic noise snapped them back to reality. Elena raised her hand in a silent signal for them to stop. Both crept toward a narrow curve and peeked around the corner. Dim flashlight beams flickered in the distance. At least 3 men were searching the tunnel, exchanging low-voiced commands. "They found us again," Elena murmured. "We need to get out before they block all the exits," Sophia whispered, her mind already crafting a plan. With calculated movements, they retreated quietly and slipped into an old side passage, partially blocked by debris. "This will buy us some time, if we can get out before they notice," Elena said. Sophia nodded and began moving smaller stones to create a narrow passage. The work was slow and exhausting, but there was no other choice. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they worked in deadly silence. Suddenly, nearby voices grew louder. "Over here." "I heard something," one of the men shouted. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. With one last push, she shoved a large stone aside, opening a narrow escape path. "Go!" she whispered urgently to Elena. They both crawled through the tight passage, ignoring the cuts and scrapes inflicted by the sharp rocks. When they emerged on the other side, they collapsed into a deeper, darker tunnel. Sophia quickly got to her feet, helping Elena up. "Keep running," Elena ordered, already hearing the approaching footsteps. Running as fast as they could, they dashed through the tunnel until they spotted an old, rusty metal ladder leading to the surface. "Climb," Elena commanded, covering their retreat with her weapon ready. With every step they climbed, the sound of their pursuers grew louder. When they finally reached the top, Sophia pushed the heavy iron cover with all her strength, revealing an exit to a deserted side street. They stumbled out, gasping for air, collapsing onto the cold ground. Elena slammed the cover shut with a loud clang, temporarily blocking the passage. "That'll hold them for a while," she said between ragged breaths. Before they could recover, a car's headlights flared from the other side of the street, illuminating them fully. A black vehicle stood parked, and the familiar figure of the man hunting them emerged from the shadows. "Run!" Elena shouted, grabbing Sophia's arm, but it was too late. The man was already advancing, determined to finish what he'd started. The fight for survival had just reached a whole new level. The intense headlights blinded Sophia as Elena pulled her into a narrow alley. The sound of tires screeching against the asphalt echoed through the deserted street as the black car sped toward them. They knew they couldn't run forever. "Where to now?" Sophia asked, her breath heavy. Elena frantically scanned the area until she spotted a partially open metal door. Without hesitation, she pushed Sophia inside and slammed the door shut behind them. The interior was an old abandoned factory, filled with debris and rusted machinery. The smell of oil and rust was suffocating. "We have to face them here," Elena said, checking her weapon's ammunition. "There's nowhere left to run." Sophia nodded, gripping her old survival knife. As exhausted as she was, something inside her refused to give up. Elena quickly assessed the perimeter, using old crates and machinery to create makeshift barriers. Sophia, guided by her sharp instincts, positioned herself on an elevated platform, giving her a clear view of the entrance. "They're coming," she whispered, hearing steady footsteps echoing down the dark corridor. Suddenly, the metal door burst open with a deafening crash. 3 armed men entered in formation, their trained eyes scanning the room. Sophia remained perfectly still, waiting for the right moment. One of the men moved toward the center of the room. Just as he raised his weapon, Elena emerged from the shadows and fired with precision, taking him down instantly. After her, one of his comrades shouted, charging toward Elena. Seizing the distraction, Sophia leaped from the platform with swift agility, taking down the second man with a precise strike from her knife. But the leader didn't hesitate. Wearing a cold, emotionless expression, he drew a gun and pointed it directly at Elena. "It's over. Drop your weapons," he commanded. Sophia felt the world stop. For an instant, all her painful memories and suppressed fears surged to the surface. She knew this was a decisive moment. With a quick motion, Sophia grabbed a rusty chain hanging from the ceiling and hurled it with all her strength, hitting the man's arm and making his gun fall from his grip. Elena seized the opening, disarming him with a precise strike and pinning him to the ground. "Who's finished now?" she whispered breathlessly. The man laughed disdainfully, despite his pain. "You think this ends here?" he growled. "I'm just the beginning." Before he could say more, the distant sound of police sirens announced their arrival. With the leader neutralized and his men incapacitated, Sophia and Elena left the factory as the first police cars arrived, surrounding the area. One of the officers ran toward them, offering support. "Are you two all right?" he asked, surprised to see Sophia so young yet so resolute. "Yes, we are now," Elena replied, exhausted. Sophia watched as the leader was handcuffed and taken to a patrol car, his cold eyes still fixed on her like a silent threat. But for the first time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt free.